The eCom Seller Summit was created to prove that with the right tools and training, anyone and everyone can make money in e-commerce. So many people want to try their hand at e-commerce, selling on eBay, Amazon, Shopify, and more, but they're afraid they won't be successful. This summit will show you that there's many ways to do e-commerce, and there are many platforms you can explore because e-commerce really has no limits. It really can pay your bills, and e-commerce never sleeps. There's nothing like waking up to profits from getting sales all night long. My name is Nicole Whitlock, and this is the eCom Seller Summit.
Hello, everybody. This is Nicole Whitlock with the eCom Seller Summit. And today's key featured speaker is Jeff Schick. Now, Jeff is a gentleman that I actually enjoy connecting with. He's an attorney, and he's going to be talking to us about the things that we need to know as e-commerce sellers as we go on this journey of, becoming successful, but also scaling and growing our business. So, Jeff, I'm so glad that you're part of the summit, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. And of course, today's topic is one that's near and dear to my heart. It's all about how do you start a business. And so, as some of y'all may know, I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. I've had a couple different e-commerce businesses over the years. I'm an attorney as well. And so I want to just talk about, what do you need to know? So we'll talk about trademarks, because everyone always comes to me and says, I need a trademark before I can start my business, which may or may not be true. We'll talk about LLCs and S corporations, what the difference is between the two, how they merge together. You could, believe it or not, some people don't realize you can have an S corporation or an LLC taxed as an S corporation, which is the double benefits of both. And then, we'll talk about a little bit about insurance now. I'm not a licensed insurance broker, but I can tell you who to talk to for that. And then we'll kind of take it from there. And so we'll just, have a casual little, hour-long chat or so about the basics of starting your business. So.
I love it. I'm excited. I'm sure that I'm going to learn something along this journey. So let's hit the first one.
All right. So trademarks. Number one question people come to me when they're starting their business and they say, I want to start a business, and it might be an Amazon business. It might be a Walmart business. Who knows what it is? It could be any type of business. And they come to me and they say, all right, I'm starting a business. I need my trademark today. And so let's talk about that a little bit. So what's interesting is, first off, trademarks are something that you definitely should have as you grow your business, but it's not necessarily the first thing on the block. So what types of sellers need a trademark? Well, private label sellers. If you're going to start a private label brand, you will need a trademark eventually, but not necessarily from day one. And one of the very simple reasons why you don't need a trademark to start a business is that you can't get a trademark full registration until you can show that it's actually in use. Now, what does that mean? You actually have to be selling something. So applying for a trademark when you're starting your business, you can certainly do it. It's called an intent to use mark, but you can't actually get a full registration until it's in use. So that's just one thing to start there. So when is that prime time to get a trademark? Well, obviously, before you start producing your good, you probably want to start, get a trademark. Now, the cool thing the U.S. government allows you to do is you can actually start as an intent to use. It's called a 1B registration, and you can convert that to an in-use registration or a 1A registration. Now, it does have extra cost, so it's about $150 more plus, attorney time, a little bit more. So you're probably looking about $200, $300 more to do it that way. But you do have the added benefits of getting protected sooner. So like let's say you come up with an amazing brand name and you're going to start a private label sports supplement company.
Okay.
Well, rather than invest thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars in packaging and branding without a trademark first, you might decide to go with an intent to use mark. So that means you're actually going to go to the USPTO. And I'd say you want to file through an attorney because you have the best chances of getting it approved. But you go to an attorney, you get them to file a mark. You say, I'm intending to use, this brand name. We're going to call it brand XYZ.
Okay.
And then the attorney's going to say, well, are you using it yet? No, I'm not using it yet. Okay. So we have to file it as intent to use. And so you file the application. You say, I'm going to use brand XYZ. The great news is that it's going to go through the whole process. So what does a trademark process look like? Well, first off, you submit your application. It's going to take several months of just sitting there doing nothing. And then a trademark attorney is going to be assigned at the USPTO. That's the United States Patent and Trademark Office. That trademark attorney is going to scrutinize your mark like crazy. They're going to say, does this look similar to other marks? Is it confusing? Is it descriptive? They're going to go through this whole checklist. If you pass all the tests, then they're going to say, okay, this is a good enough mark for us. We're going to proceed to publish it for opposition. What that means is it goes on the Federal Register. People have 30 days to say, I object to this mark. So this is all still part of this intent to use process, or it could be the in use process. But where it's going to change is after that publishing for opposition. So if you're intent to use, it'll go through that whole publishing for opposition. You'll be given basically a certificate saying when you're using this mark, you can convert it to an in-use mark, and you hold that for up to 6 months. You can always extend it for another segment of time if you need to, but at least start out with 6 months. And so you get this certificate. That gives you that time to know that your mark is going to be good. So then you start producing branding materials, you start making your Facebook page, you start making your product detail pages, all that stuff. And of course, you start making your product. And then you start selling it. Now, what happens when you sell it? It's in use. So makes sense. You're now in use. You're using the mark in commerce. So, we have this intent to use mark. We then go to the USPTO and we say, hey, guess what? Trademark attorney, I'm now using this in use. And they're going to say, that's great. Give us a proof that it's being sold. And so you give them, proof that it's for sale, pictures of your packaging, pictures of your website. And then they're going to say, okay, we're going to convert this to an in-use mark. It takes a couple weeks, sometimes a couple months if there's delays, but it's not, you're not too concerned because you've already gotten that certificate that says that it's good to go once they process it. And so once it's in use, you get that registration number and you're fully protected for the period of time that trademarks are valid for. If you start off and you skip that intent to use process, that's okay too, but you would just have to wait to file till you're in use. And then you're going to have to sit through that whole delay while you're using the mark. And where this gets dangerous is that you might find out, and we've had this happen to clients before where they start selling a product and then the trademark office comes back and says, sorry, brand XYZ is way too close to brand ZYX. And then you have to switch your name. And since you're already in use, now you're switching everything from scratch. So that's why I recommend, the intent to use process with the conversion later. So that's just, that's trademarks there.
Well, I will tell you, you already know I did a trademark for our stuff, which was a very interesting process to say the least. And I'm like, okay, part of that was still terribly confusing for me because, I went with an attorney. I went through the Amazon process. So I know that once you get a trademark, like it was difficult for me to understand the difference between like registered, like trademark with the R and then the TM, and then when do I need a copyright and that whole process.
Right.
So can you like clarify some of that so that people are trying to make sure that they understand, like, okay, if you're producing a product and I will not say my legal version of how I interpret it. I will let you say it. But again, I know that there's more to it than, once you get your registered versus moving to a trademark. And then if you determine whether or not you do need a copyright or not. So can you like step through that? Okay.
Yeah. So trademarks protect brand names. They protect slogans. They protect the logo that stands for something. So like if you think about the Home Depot, they have a trademark on the words, the Home Depot. They also have a trademark on the slogan, you can do it, we can help. They also have a slogan or a trademark on the orange box that says like the Home Depot, all in a diagonal. So those are, one brand, 3 separate trademarks that they have. So that's, in general, that's what trademarks protect. Copyrights protect copywritten content. So that can be videos, it can protect audio files, can protect songs, things that you write. So if you write a book, like Harry Potter, that's protected, so that's what copyrights protect. And then obviously there's patents and we won't talk about those because those get even more complicated. Now, when it comes to trademarks, what's really interesting is you can have common law trademarks. which like just coming up with a name, like if you don't have a trademark on your name, you have what's called common law trademarks. That gives you the TM. So you put a TM behind it because you don't have a registered trademark, but you have a common law trademark. You can also have a registered trademark. That's where you get the circle with an R. But in order to have that, you've got to go to the USPTO, file that whole process to get a registered trademark, and then you get a registration number. That's when you're allowed to use the circle with an R. So, and for instance, like if you're in that intent to use process, you can't use the circle with an R until you've done the conversion, because you just have a potential trademark until you have a registered trademark. So the R stands for registered. So.
Okay, so once you get that back now, so that's good to know. All right. Okay, so I don't want to mess up your flow. You have a list, so let's go ahead.
Also, the other big thing too with the circle with the R, you don't want to put that on any of your packaging or your product specimens or your websites until you've actually gotten it. The reason for that is because the USPTO will come down hard on you. You're not allowed to use it. Legally, you cannot use the circle with an R until you've got a registration number. And they will check your website. And if you've got a circle with an R on your website and they find it and you don't have a registered trademark, you'll hear something from them. Okay. They're going to be snippy about it, and they'll make your life hard just because they can. So, it's just a word of advice there.
Okay.
So, all right. So that's trademarks. So a lot of times people, like I said, people come to me and they say, I'm launching my brand. I need a trademark from day one. Well, maybe not. Let's at least figure it out. You may want to start the trademark process, but we'll get, let's get there in time. Second thing, people come to me and when they're starting their business and they say, okay, I've started my business. I need an S Corp because my friend Johnny has an S Corp and he says that he saves so much money on taxes by having an S Corp that I need that too. Well, Johnny either has a big business or a growing business that makes sense to have an S Corp, or Johnny's gotten Google legal advice and is, practicing Google tax law. Not necessarily the type of law you want. Or Johnny just doesn't know any better. And so we'll talk about that in just a second. So most businesses do not start off as S Corps. Why is that? Because S Corps have special quirks. And what I mean by special quirks is, like, for instance, the owner of an S Corp, the shareholder, has to be paid a salary. And if you're not paid a reasonable salary, the IRS can come in there and fine you for it. Well, if you're starting a growing business, salary and benefits for the owner is probably not number one on your list of things you're planning on doing.
Correct.
So in most cases, I recommend to clients, no, you don't start out as an S Corp. Now, keep in mind, S Corps can either be corporations that elect S Corporation status, or they can be LLCs that elect S Corporation status. So instead, for a lot of clients, we advise start out as an LLC, and then when you're big enough, elect S Corp. It's called checking the box. And the beauty is every year from January until basically the end of February, it's the first 60 days of the year, you can choose to elect S Corporation status for that calendar year when it comes to your taxes. So if you start in 2022, and like it's February right now, if you start in 2022, you probably aren't going to file as an S Corp for 2022. But in next January of 2023, you might decide, hey, for 2023, we think we're going to do just as well as we did last year. We can file then, and it'll take effect as of January 1st, 2023, as long as you get it within the first 60 days, you make that filing. So something to think about there. But let's get back. I guess we can back up a couple steps. Let's talk about LLCs in general. Do you need an LLC to start your business? The answer to that is it depends.
It depends.
So I had a seller come to me 2 years ago, and they said they were going to start up a business that sold gas, like basically automotive accessories. And in particular, they were devices like gas cans.
Okay.
He definitely needs an LLC when he starts. Why is that? Because gas is flammable. And if his product is defective, it will kill you. So like a defective gas can in your trunk, then, could turn into, if you remember the Ford Pintos and how
yes. Or the Vegas, yeah. The Pintos, the Vegas, yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So remember, the problem with Ford Pintos is if you got rear-ended, the gasoline tank was in the trunk, and your car would explode. So with the so for the seller that came to me that had the gas can idea, yeah, he definitely needed an LLC to start that up, even though wasn't hadn't even started making a single dollar from it yet. The reason being is because when he made that first dollar, he had he was going to have a target on him if he sold something that hurt someone. So anytime you're dealing with products that are like baby products, children's products, things that like car accessories that actually could affect drivability of a car, or things that deal with like flammability, hazmat, so forth, yeah, you're going to need an LLC. Now, another common question people come to me with is, hey, I found my friend sent me this short little checklist that was written by some Amazon guru that tells me how to file my own LLC and save a ton of money, because I can go to the Secretary of State of the state of Florida, SunBiz, and I can click file an LLC, and I can have an LLC set up for me within a week. Isn't that just as good as what you can do? And the answer is, well, it's half of the equation, because filing the LLC is half of what I do. The other half of what I do is drafting all the LLC operating documents, like your operating agreement, your buy-sell agreement, any sort of other documents that come alongside the LLC. Now, that your friend that gave you that sheet, that's just creating your entity. But an entity without those other operating documents is traveling in a little no man's land of registered but not completely formed. And if you were to sell, let's say we're selling a baby product, and let's say it's a stroller. Okay. Well, we're selling a stroller, and we set up Jeff's Stroller Company LLC on SunBiz ourselves, and we don't hire an attorney to write any of those documents. And that stroller one day collapses with a baby, and the baby hits its head, and it goes to the ER, and the parents don't have health insurance. Now, how expensive do you think an ER visit without health insurance for a baby that hits its head is going to be?
A lot.
Because you're talking about the ER time, the ambulance ride, the CT scan, the monitoring and observation, the children's pediatrician coming in, as well as the ER doctor coming in.
I could go on and on. I know. Yeah, it's a lot.
Easily $50,000 to $100,000 in one visit. By the time that weekend is up. So who are they going to turn to? They don't have health insurance. They're going to be driving by, and they're going to see a billboard on the side of the road that says, 1-800-411-PAIN. And they're going to say, I'm not going to declare bankruptcy because I don't have health insurance. This person sold me a stroller that hurt my baby. They're going to pay for it. Now, if you have your LLC that you formed yourself, they're going to sue you. It's going to happen. And if you don't have it, and then of course we're going to get to insurance in a bit, but if you don't have insurance, they're going to, you're going to be defending this lawsuit. And for all intents and purposes, there's a decent chance they're going to win, because product liability law favors the consumer in the United States. The manufacturers have the duty to make sure the products they sell are safe. And if you're selling a product that hurts somebody, you're going to get, you're going to be held accountable. Now, a lot of people say, but I've got my LLC. Remember, I formed it myself, and limited liability company means I have limited liability, so I can't personally be sued. What's going to happen is they're going to obtain a judgment against your LLC for, let's say, $100,000, and you've got $500 in your LLC checking account. Well, that $500 is gone. Like, they're going to go to your bank and give them a judgment order, and the bank is going to write them a check for $500. But then they're going to say, well, now we've got $99,500 left. And if you've got a paid off car, or, a boat, or you've got a house, they're going to start looking, and they're going to say, well, the owner of this LLC has this money. And they're going to start poking at it and say, how do we get through the LLC? And the first thing they're going to say is, show us your operating agreement. Well, when I looked at this Facebook guru, he told me I didn't need one. I could form it myself on SunBiz. So now the it's called piercing the corporate veil. So you start piercing through it, and they show, well, this isn't really being run like a business. This is just Jeff's hobby, because Jeff's stroller company and Jeff's hobby look really similar, because a real business would have had an operating agreement. A hobby business would do it on Sunbiz. So, and I'm picking on Florida because I'm licensed in Florida, but Sunbiz is synonymous with any of the states in the United States. Secretary of State could be Wyoming, could be Nevada, and yeah, forming your own Wyoming or Nevada LLC on, inkfile.com without the proper documentation is just as bad as going to Sunbiz. It's the same difference. You're just in a different state. Wow. So just, things to think about. So how do you pierce the corporate veil? Well, you start showing that Jeff and Jeff's stroller company are really the same thing. So like, does Jeff's stroller company, does it have its own checking account? Well, if Jeff's stroller company is using Jeff's personal checking account, they're the same thing. It's called the alter ego. Now, okay, let's say that Jeff's stroller company was set up properly in that aspect. Jeff did have a separate bank account for Jeff's stroller company LLC than his personal. Okay, well, there's no operating agreement. So does Jeff's stroller company just pay Jeff whenever it feels like it? Or how does Jeff get paid by Jeff's stroller company? If the answer to that is Jeff's stroller company just takes money out whenever it feels like it, and there's nothing documented, still starting to look a lot like Jeff's stroller company and Jeff are the same thing. So I could go on, but those are the common ways they pierce the corporate veil. Now, where does this get different with an operating agreement? An operating agreement defines your responsibilities. So if you have an operating agreement that says any transactions over $10,000 will be documented by shareholder approval, and you actually follow that. And so Jeff's stroller company only, they go and purchase a purchase order for strollers for $50,000, but they have a minutes taken in the corporate minute book showing Jeff had a meeting with himself, because he's the only shareholder, and decided to order, approved the order of $50,000 worth of strollers. We're now following corporate formalities. It may be one person and it may be small, but we're following the same rules, the same things that Home Depot would do if they're placing a purchase order, which is how we protect Jeff's stroller company and say that it's a real business. So those are reasons why, your properly formed and properly managed LLC is really the more important part of that equation than just merely having an LLC, because merely having the LLC it's half the equation. So there's my spiel on that.
Well, and there's so you can have a couple of different types of LLCs, correct?
You can. So LLCs by default, they're flow through entities. So an LLC with multiple members is called a partnership, is how it's taxed. An LLC can also elect to be taxed as a C corporation. That's your standard, big corporation in America, Home Depot, American Airlines, Delta, whatever you name it. That's a C corporation. An LLC can also be taxed as a sole member. If it's got one member, it can be taxed as a single member flow through entity. And then the LLCs can be taxed as a S corporation. Up to 100 members could be part of an S corporation LLC. The beauty of LLC taxation is that as you grow, most would start out as a sole member LLC, and then you might bring on a partner and you become a partnership. You don't do anything special. Just, your accountant files paperwork, and of course your attorney drafts the agreements, the operating agreement that shows the person buying membership interest and becoming a partner. And that's how you have a partnership. And then at some point you might elect, hey, we want to become an S corp. That can be either a single member S corp or a partnership that changes to become an S corp. Either way, you file your IRS form to become an S corp. The IRS sends you a letter back in 9 months because they're slow, and they says, congratulations, you're an S corp effective this date that you selected on your paperwork, and now you've got an S corp. So that's really the beauty of the LLC, is that it's very flexible. Most people don't, in an e-commerce setting, are not going to become C corps. Every once in a while, I have a client that I'll talk to that says they want to be a C corp. We usually talk them out of it because there's usually no reason for it. It's based on bad advice. It's usually internet advice that they found some website or had some friend whose friend told them this, some friend's accountant's mother's child told them that they should be a C corp, and then we rip it apart and figure out why they were told that, and it's usually wrong. It just doesn't happen because C corps have double taxation. So why would you pay tax twice if you don't need to? It's
Doesn't make any sense.
right.
Okay.
But but yeah, now LLCs, I know I said you probably don't need to start out as an LLC, but assuming you're in one of these, like the child product, you definitely want to start out as an LLC to protect your personal assets. What about if we're selling dog toys? Probably don't need to be an LLC from the day you start. But at some point you want to become one. And when is that? It's when you know that this is more than just a hobby and it's a real business. So for instance, like we start off and we're selling dog toys. Our first month we do $200. Probably not time to become an LLC yet. Second month we go up to $1,000. Might not be time. Third month we do $10,000. Hey, what is $10,000 a month times 12? That's $120,000 a year. Now we're looking like a business, not a hobby. Probably want to start thinking about that LLC. The third month was 10,000. Fourth month we do another 10,000. Okay, we've gotten $20,000 worth of revenue. It's probably time to talk to an attorney and get my LLC set up properly, because now we know that this is, for the first couple of months was, the third month was proof of concept. The fourth month is proven concept. Now it's time, you don't need much more proof of concept after that. You've got something real. So now it's time. That's private label. What about retail arbitrage and online arbitrage?
Yeah, I was going to ask that question because, you can have an amazing Q4 and you don't have another, like, oh, okay, I made this much in October, November, December, and then January, February, March, I'm not making anything, like, for some people.
Right. Okay. Correct. Could happen. So what happens is you're doing OA, RA, wholesale. Well, if you have one of those, if you have 1 month you're at 1,000, the second month you're at 10,000, third month you're at 2,000. Once you get to a point where you know that you're going to start making a decent chunk of money and you feel comfortable that you're going to continue doing this, that's when you should go ahead and get your LLC. The reason being is because you're selling a lot of products that belong to other people. You're not necessarily doing the safety testing. You're not doing the manufacturing. So you're relying on other people to do all of the product safety testing. Now, if you're buying Procter & Gamble products, you're probably pretty safe. If you're buying Nike products, again, pretty safe. These are big companies. But if you start going off into the OA world and you start finding random products, maybe Amazon to Amazon flips or Amazon to Walmart flips. Well, now we're getting into questionable territory, especially if you're buying something that might be private label. You definitely want to be protecting yourself, because unfortunately, not all products that are purchased online arbitrage are created equally.
That's true.
A product made by Procter & Gamble, extensive safety testing. Product made by
Bob's Garage. Maybe not.
Might not. I've had some private label sellers that I've worked with before that have $1 million products that do $1 million a year on Amazon as a private label, and they have fake safety testing that we had to correct. that product you would not want to be selling as an online arbitrage Amazon to Amazon flip, because if you buy their product assuming that the safety testing that's on the product detail page is real, and it turns out that it's not, and it hurts somebody, you sold the product. So that brings us to a topic about product liability in the US. Like, who's responsible?
Yeah.
A lot of people think, well, I'm not the manufacturer, so I'm not responsible, especially in the RA/OA community.
Oh,
in the US, product liability is passed on to anyone in the supply chain. So what does that mean for sellers? It means that the manufacturer is responsible because they made the product. If the manufacturer distributes to a master distributor, these are the distributors that take pallets and then ship them around the country to distribution centers before they go to the retailers. They're responsible. Let's go back to let's start with Procter and Gamble. It's Tide Pods. We're selling Tide Pods.
Mm.
Procter and Gamble owns Tide. They're
Mm-hmm.
responsible because they're the manufacturer. Procter and Gamble distributes the Tide Pods to XYZ Distribution Corp, which is their master distributor. They're responsible because they're the master distributor. XYZ sells to regional distributor, ABC Corp, for ABC Southeast. So they're responsible because they're basically a sub distributor. ABC Southeast sells to Publix. Publix is now responsible. Publix sells to retail arbitrage seller. They're responsible. Retail arbitrage seller, of course, sells on Amazon to customer. Amazon's responsible as well. Anyone along that chain becomes responsible. And so what that means for sellers is that even though you may be at the very bottom of that chain, you're still in the chain, which is why it's important that you protect yourself, because if you sell the Tide Pods that have a defect or somehow violate product liability law, which we'll talk about in just a second, what that means.
Okay.
And let's say that, Jessica Smith purchases the Tide Pods and Jessica's daughter, Claire, eats one. She's going to sue everyone in that chain of custody, especially if Claire goes to the ER and they don't have health insurance, like we talked about earlier. And they're going to get everyone that touched that product is going to get named in the lawsuit. So it's going to be Jessica Smith on behalf of Claire Smith.
Yep.
Versus Procter and Gamble, ABC Distribution Southeast, XYZ Distributor, Publix, DEF Retail Arbitrage Seller, and Amazon.com Inc. and its affiliates and subsidiaries. And so that's where it starts to get really real for sellers. Now, how do we mitigate that risk? Well, first off is making sure the products that you sell have all appropriate safety warnings, because product liability in the U.S. comes from three forms: defective product, like defectively manufactured. The Tide Pod lid was supposed to clip on and be child safety proof, but this particular batch was missing the child safety lid. And so it was defectively produced. Pretty easy for sellers to understand that one. Most sellers get it. Like, okay, it was missing the child safety latch. That's defective. Second major form of product liability law in the U.S. is defective design, meaning a better design was available that could have been safer. So we have a Tide Pod lid, container lid, that clips on, but it is easy enough for a child to open it without much dexterity required. That's defective design, defective engineering. It could have been engineered better. The third major form that gets a lot of sellers that people don't think about: failure to warn. For instance, it doesn't say on the Tide, you buy a bottle of Tide Pods and it doesn't have a label on it that says keep out of reach of children, hazardous if swallowed. Sounds simple enough, but if it doesn't say it, the law is going to assume that it doesn't say it because it's not necessary. So that's what we do.
Well, that's one. Sorry, my alarm is going on. That I know there's rock music. That is one. I think about the fact that us as sellers, when we are shipping our stuff into Amazon, like the suffocation notification that's on the outside of the poly bags and other stuff like that. I think about that as well, especially if you're packaging up stuff to send into Amazon, it's going to be shipped to a customer. Like requirements there as well. The one thing I think is interesting from a liability standpoint is, like, I wonder what's going to happen with this whole 3D printer thing, because I was literally on another session earlier today where we were talking about a gentleman that sells parts for cars that he makes with this 3D printer because the manufacturers no longer make it. So we're talking about older cars, and I'm like, you got liability there possibly.
He needs to talk to me.
Yeah.
He is a perfect candidate for making sure that his LLC is set up properly. And we need to talk about insurance, because that's the next topic, is insurance.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Cause I'm like, what if something happens with you making this item and it's going on a vehicle, which is a very, it's a lot of weight. It can have a lot of power. If it breaks down, causes a
Right.
wreck. Oh my God, the liability there is just bananas because people are going crazy with these 3D printers these days.
Right. No, and it's really valid because there's that not only, by the way, with product liability law, it's not only who you foreseeably could harm, it's or who you know could get harmed, it's who could foreseeably be harmed. So like that guy, using his car parts as an example, if he sells car parts that are somehow defectively manufactured using his 3D printer and there's a defect and it causes an accident, not only can he be sued by the person who bought his her car part, but he can be sued by the person who, like any other person, like that gets injured in that car accident as well.
Yeah.
So,
or anything that they took out, like a light pole, the city could sue them, or the county, or whatever, signs on the street, destruction to the pavement. Like, okay, we could go down the list.
Oh, right. Yeah. Like, like if he gets really unlucky and the person driving that car with the defective car part runs into a school bus with 30 kids on it, we know where this is going.
Oh yeah, it's not going anywhere good. I just think that, that's why I was like, you're doing what? But that's okay. I mean, it was an interesting conversation. But again,
yeah.
It's an interesting conversation.
So now, and in his case, he needs an LLC from day one and insurance, which we'll talk about in just a second.
Yeah, he does.
So those are the big ways that product liability comes into play that sellers need to think about. It also, an interesting thing to consider, if you're doing OA and RA, and you have most sellers, you're going to be putting FN SKU labels. If you're sending to Amazon, if you're sending to Walmart, you're going to be putting Walmart fulfillment network SKUs on the product. Don't cover any of those warning labels, because if you put your barcode sticker over a warning label and somebody gets hurt and they come to court and they show the bottle that you stickered over the warning label, and maybe the warning label says rinse your eyes with water if it gets in your eyes, and you stickered that with a barcode, and they lost their sight in one eye because they didn't know to do that, you could be responsible for it. So make sure you don't cover warning labels. Don't cover directions, don't cover warning labels, and don't cover ingredients. Why did I add ingredients into there? Because if somebody's got an allergy, they cannot have, you can't cover the ingredients. And so that's there. So where we're going with this as well.
I know you had a distraction for just a second. I understand. So it's all good. It's part of life.
Yeah, exactly. So when we're starting up our business, depending on what we're selling, we need either an LLC from day one or we need it relatively soon thereafter. Same goes with trademarks. If you're in private label, you need a trademark. Maybe not from day one, but you should plan on it, because the last thing you want to do in private label is invest tons of money, and then have to change your brand.
Yeah.
After doing it. And believe it or not, I've had several clients where they've built up really good brands. So I had one client who's doing several $100,000 a year of sales and then gets a cease and desist letter because they had not gotten a trademark. They had not done a trademark search, and they were using a brand name that was confusingly similar to a major brand who had much deeper pockets than they did. And that brand came after him and said, "Hey, you got to change your name."
Yeah.
And they, had to change their name.
That's what I talk about all the time. It's like, okay, if they have a room full of lawyers and you can't take them on, I would not do that.
So there's that. And then the last, and then we get into insurance. Insurance is something that's required by all the marketplaces. Now, required and required to prove are two different things. So most marketplaces won't require you to prove that you have insurance until your sales reach a certain threshold or somebody gets hurt using a product that you sold. That second use case scenario, really bad, because when Amazon reaches out to you and they say, "Hey, we've had to pay out because someone got hurt using your product, and so we need your insurance information," that's not the time to find out. That's not the time to be like, "Hey, guess what, Amazon? I didn't have insurance yet, but it's on my to-do list for this week," because they're, uh, you don't get insurance after your house is on fire, obviously. So like I said, I'm not a licensed insurance broker. I rely on Ashland Haddon a lot for that. So there's plenty of insurance brokers out there to choose from. The ones you want to watch out for, though, is you don't want to call State Farm. Jake from State Farm might be great with your house, but not your business. A lot of the home, like residential insurance companies, your Allstate, State Farm, Liberty Mutual, even USAA, Nationwide, Geico, Progressive, those ones are consumer-based policies. They're designed to protect your average consumer. So if you need it for your house and for your car, it's perfect. You don't need anything more than that necessarily. Depending on, obviously every case is different. If you're in a $5 million mansion, then Geico is not the way to go. But it's just it's all, of course, it's always relative. But when it comes to your business, Geico is definitely not the way to go because their policies, if like they may say they have small divisions, and they do, but they're going to be designed for like your flower shop, your bricks and mortar retail single store operator, the person who's got your traditional retail with just like 1,000 square feet. They're really not even designed for the people with 2,000 or 3,000 square feet. But at that point, if you're in 3,000 to 5,000 square feet of retail space, you need a commercial policy through a commercial broker. The reason being is because commercial policies cover more. So I had a seller that I worked with a couple of years ago that found this out the hard way when the policy they had through a residential broker didn't cover intellectual property concerns. Now, most people say, well, IP, I'm not planning on, stealing anyone's IP, so it shouldn't matter. The seller was doing retail arbitrage. They were buying DVDs and flipping them online. Didn't think that they needed anything more than their standard homeowners insurance, not homeowners insurance, but their standard insurance policy issued by their homeowners insurance company, which did name their business. For all purposes, it met Amazon's standards. It had $1 million of liability coverage. It met all the boxes for Amazon to accept it. But what it had was an exclusion on the exclusions page. And that number one exclusion was, we do not cover intellectual property matters. What happened to the seller? One of the DVDs that they'd purchased was counterfeit. They didn't know it at the time. They thought they were buying from a reputable source. What the reputable source was doing was packaging, selling cases of DVDs, and half of the case was counterfeit and half of it was real.
Oh, wow.
The DVD, the copyright owner of the DVD purchased it, tested the DVD, found that one DVD was real, one was fake. Came after him saying, you're selling counterfeit DVDs, assuming that the seller was the one who was guilty. I told the seller, hey, this is going to get really expensive really fast. You need to open a claim with your insurance company, because that's what your insurance policy is for, is to cover you against these sort of things. Insurance company within a day wrote back, denied coverage, see exclusion 1, no coverage for intellectual property. What that meant is the seller had to pay for all this out of pocket. Now, it had a happy ending. We resolved the matter. The seller didn't have to pay anything. We got it the studios went after the appropriate party, which was the dirty distributor, but that, still was, the seller had to pay for all their legal fees out of pocket, and that was not cheap. And if they'd had insurance coverage, the insurance company would have at least picked it up. So when you go with a commercial insurance company, most of them won't exclude that sort of scenario. Some of them do, so you have to read your policy carefully. Every insurance company is going to have a different policy for every state. So a policy that's issued in New York might not be the same as a policy issued in Ohio, even if they're for the same exact insurance company, and you might even be paying the same exact premium. So you just have to read your policy carefully. There's actually, believe it or not, lawyers out there, if you're not familiar with what you're reading, because a lot of these are legalese, there's actually lawyers you can hire that specialize in insurance company contracts, and you can pay them for a consultation to review your policy and make sure that what you think you're getting is what you're getting. Okay. Really important if you're a bigger seller. If you're starting out, probably not as important to get one of those lawyers to review the policy. But certainly if you're in like the mid 7 figures, 8 figures for sure, you're going to want to have a lawyer review your insurance policies to make sure that you're covered in case you sell something that hurts someone, because you have a bigger target on your back.
Yeah.
And you definitely want to have proper insurance coverage. So it's not something you're going to quote online. It's you go through a commercial broker that specializes in insurance. And like, that's why I tell people to go to Ashland, because someone that understands e-commerce will know the difference between, for instance, private label and retail arbitrage. If you go to your random insurance broker that you've been friends with for several years that goes to the community center with you, they're not necessarily going to know what an Amazon business is. So like in my case, I went to an insurance broker that when I first started out, and they gave me a policy that was extremely comprehensive. It was about $4,000 a year. And when I sent it to Ashland, she goes, "Did you know that you're insuring one of Amazon's warehouses under this policy?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Yeah, you took out insurance that covers Amazon's warehouse in Georgia for, that's why it's $4,000. She's like, you don't need coverage on Amazon's warehouse for fire. If your product catches on fire in their warehouse, they're going to pay you for it. So you don't need to be reserving coverage for your portion of Amazon's warehouse." I'm like, "Oh, that's lovely." So then, of course, she redid the policy, and it was like $1,500 a year. So you can also overpay for insurance too by going to people that don't understand what you're doing.
E-commerce and warehouse and all that other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good to know. So Ashland, Hayden. What's her last?
Yeah.
Haddon. Okay.
Yeah, she's in Indiana, so she's specialized in insurance.
I will definitely have to see if we can get her on a summit at some point so we can talk about that, because I think that's a good conversation to have.
It is, yeah. It's interesting, and of course, there's different types of insurance too. So, product liability and general liability insurance are not the same thing. So, for instance, Amazon, Walmart, eBay, those marketplaces all require that you have at least $1 million of general liability insurance. Product liability is separate. So if you're a private label manufacturer, you need product liability in addition to general liability. What's the difference? General liability covers you if you sell a product made by others that hurts somebody and is defective. Product liability covers you if you sell a product that you made yourself or through a contract manufacturer that hurts somebody. Okay. So, and a lot of time, and like, it's even important, it's especially important if you're importing from abroad, because if you make a product like that, Jeff Stroller company imports strollers from China. That Chinese manufacturer will change his name as soon as he finds out there's a defective stroller that was sold, and you will never hear from him again.
Oh, that's just horrible. God. So. I had not thought about that scenario. That was bad. Okay. God. Okay. Well, is there anything else that you think that we as sellers, whether we're at the beginning of our journey, in the middle of our journey, that you think we should know about? I'm sure that we could go on for hours, but any other tip that you think might be helpful for those?
Pro tip.
Selling? Okay.
Accounting is a good thing. I'm not an accountant, but sellers should be, doing accounting stuff from the day they start. You wouldn't believe the number of sellers I talk to that track all their inventory purchase costs really well, but they don't track like their cell phone bill, their scan power bill, their eCom seller summit investments, all these other things that they spend money on that are tax deductible. Even legal services are tax deductible. And so if you're not at least using Quicken or QuickBooks to track your expenses, you're probably missing out on deductions. And I think QuickBooks is like $20 a month for the base plan. And you will save, first off, it's $20 a month and it's tax deductible. So it's really costing you about $16 or $15 a month. That's the first takeaway from that. The second takeaway is you're going to save $15 a month in expenses, because one tank of gas that you are able to deduct because it's a business expense will pay for that $15 a month for QuickBooks. And believe it or not, you don't need an accountant that's tracking your expenses and doing your bookkeeping from the day you start. But once you get to a point where you're making good money,
then you do need an accountant.
you should you should get an accountant and have them do it, because otherwise you're wasting your time doing something that someone else could do faster and
Better,
maybe
maybe.
better.
Maybe better, maybe better. I mean, it is time suckage. Accounting is a lot. We do have, luckily, Nathan Hirsch with eCom Balance, who's going to
Nice.
be talking about bookkeeping, and so on the summit. So if you guys want to check out that session,
Definitely check it
definitely
out.
check it out, because bookkeeping is important. This is all things e-commerce related. So we're trying to help us all have a good journey and not have to, spend a quality time with an attorney or in court.
Right. So
Or with the IRS or any of the others. So,
correct.
all right. Well, Jeff, I am so glad that we got to listen to your session. I do have one more thing. Now, I know for those people who decide they're going to grab the All Access Pass, somewhere on this page, you'll have the opportunity to grab the All Access Pass. Jeff has an awesome bonus for you that's waiting, discounts on his services. So you don't want to miss out on that opportunity, especially if you think you're ready to establish a trademark, if you think you're ready to get your LLC going, if you want to make sure that you're covered, you're getting the right things in place for your business, depending on what type of e-commerce you decide to practice. So, Jeff, is there anything you want to share with them about that bonus or anything about your services?
Well, obviously, I'm an attorney. Most people know I started as a seller first, and that's how I paid for law school and college. I've always been extremely focused on delivering, solutions that are designed for sellers. And so, one of the things as an attorney that my law firm offers is you can actually retain my law firm on a monthly basis. That allows you to talk to me as much as you want. So, any legal questions that pop up throughout the month, you can just, you get to run them by me. I'm a licensed attorney. And I'm the first to admit, some sellers bring questions that I can't answer. Like, for instance, if you come to me and you're like, I live in Ohio and I want to set up a will for my children, I can tell you things that the will should include, but I'm definitely not going to do it for you because I'm not licensed in Ohio and I don't practice estate law. But I can help you vet an estate lawyer in Ohio that will do a great job for you. So that's one of the beauties of having an attorney on retainer, because say you get a letter from a law firm demanding that you stop selling a brand's product. You've got your attorney on retainer. Bring that letter, let me review it, let me respond to them, all that, good jazz. And you can have it, and it's affordable. It's a simple monthly service fee. And I've really tried to make that for sellers so that way you don't end up like I was in law school, having to choose between purchasing inventory or paying for books and hiring attorneys because I got a letter from Voorhees and didn't know what it meant. So
Yeah. So here's the deal. This is what I will say. The fact that he understands the e-commerce seller's journey should be like the biggest perk of them all. So I would definitely connect with Jeff. His information is on this page somewhere. If you grab the All Access Pass, you'll gain access to discounts for his services. And again, he's done this. You still sell, don't you? You still
I
sell.
haven't sold in a little bit, but I actually just found a case of products in my garage.
Oh, see.
And it's on its way to Amazon. So,
See. So technically, you still sell.
Yeah.
That's
So,
all
and
right.
I've been on the vendor side with Vendor Central, and I've got a Seller Central account. So I've been on multiple sides of the Amazon journey.
There
So
you go. But he doesn't just focus on Amazon, eBay, Etsy,
so believe it, I have
Walmart.
a Walmart account. I've got an eBay account. I've got an Amazon vendor, an Amazon seller account. I just haven't done Mercari or Poshmark yet, but I guess maybe those will be coming at some point.
There you go. See selling online is still in his blood. So there you go. All right. So Jeff, thank you so much for sharing this information. I hope you all got value in the information that Jeff shared with us today. I thought it was helpful. I'm going to go back and of course listen to this. You have the opportunity to continue to listen to this session again over and over until I think just after midnight. And then after that, you want to grab the All Access Pass. But prior to that, if you grab it, then you'll get the discounts. So Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right. And this is Jeff Schick's masterclass on, I guess you did trademarks, LLCs, insurance, all of the above. So there you go.
A little bit of accounting.
A little bit of accounting. All right. We're going to say goodbye for now, people.
Bye.